What's going on YouTube? It's Tej back again with another video. Today talking some more football news. I'm going to give you my top 10 favorite free agent signings so far. Still some names out there, still plenty of good deals that could break out. Actually, I wrote this list before some of the signings like Josh Reynolds once we got his contract details. He's playing for really cheap in Tennessee. Don't know if he'd crack the list, but this is an ever-changing list and it's subject to change. Maybe I'll redo this video in a month's time, maybe 2 months. Let me know in the comments below if you'd be interested in that. But nonetheless, today I'm going to give you my top 10 favorite free agent signings through the NFL offseason. To this point, this is obviously a subjective list. My list is not the correct list. It's just how I see it. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Who's your favorite team? What signings did you like? What signings did you not like? And overall, throughout the entire NFL, tell me what signings were so amazing that they baffled your brain, how a player settled for so little, but also give me the head scratchers where you don't know why the team signed that player or for that amount of money. I'd love to have your thoughts. Hope you all enjoy the video. If you do, please hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, like football content, please consider subscribing. Without further ado, we'll start with number 10. I got to give it up to Haason Reddick and the Carolina Panthers. 1-year deal, $6 million guaranteed, up to $8 million with incentives. Dude, I thought Haason Reddick was going to be easily making $12 million, especially once I saw Yannick Ngakoue got 13. I'm a big fan of Ngakoue's. We'll get to him later on in the video. But once I saw Ngakoue was $13 million a year, I was like, okay, Reddick will be in and around that neighborhood. But instead, $6 million contract, up to $8 million. It's a great deal for Carolina. Get a good pass rusher who's still up and coming. He played, he being Reddick, played for Coach Matt Rule at Temple. You love that fit. You love that chemistry. Now you have Reddick opposite of Brian Burns, two freaky athletic edge rushers. This is a defense that got a bunch of improvements from the draft a year ago. Every single pick taken by Carolina was on the defensive side of the football, and it showed. They looked a lot better than what we might have expected, especially after the retirement of a player like Luke Kuechly. This defense was able to hold their own, and then you bring in Reddick, it's only going to get that much better. On to number 9, Kevin Zeitler. I got to give it up to the Ravens here. I'm not happy they had a good signing. I'm a Steelers fan, but nonetheless, great value. 3 years, $22 million. They didn't let him stay on the market long. After the Giants cut him, cap casualty, Zeitler's still a solid player, and I think the Ravens can get the best out of him. They have a huge hole there at right guard. They've been missing Marshall Yanda ever since he retired. Zeitler fits in perfectly. And, you know, there's one thing that this Ravens team does excellent, and that's run the football. And it makes them a Super Bowl contender. You don't have to be a great passing quarterback if you're Lamar Jackson because of how dynamic their rushing game is. And with Orlando Brown requesting a trade, you cannot let that excellent strength deteriorate because then those weaknesses start to become more and more glaring. So I love addressing the offensive line. You get Kevin Zeitler. Maybe they'll find a way to hold on to Orlando Brown, or maybe they'll have to draft his replacement at right tackle. But nonetheless, love this move for the Ravens. And this has kind of turned out to be their quote-unquote home run signing. They came up empty on a couple of different receivers. Kenny Golladay, they offered $13 million to Juju Smith-Schuster. He accepts less to go back to Pittsburgh. So Zeitler was their prize out of this free agency period. So kind of disappointing for Baltimore, but at the minimum, you're getting a Pro Bowl level guard in my eyes who helps you maintain your identity and continue to have that great strength that you have running the football. So overall, it's my number 9 favorite signing of the offseason. On to number 8. This one again pains me, but for a different reason. Mike Hilton going to Cincinnati. It was obviously a position of need for the Bengals, and they get Mike Hilton, maybe the best slot corner in football, for $6 million a year. And look, I mean, I get he's a nickel specialist. He's only going to be that, but he blitzes really well. He's good in the run game. He's not afraid to make a play at the line of scrimmage. He wants to play physical, and he's good in coverage. He's a playmaker. He's got a nose for the football. So don't look at him just as a nickel specialist. He's just a football player who knows how to create turnovers and make big plays and provides a lot of energy on that side of the football as well. Also, you go from playing him twice a year to signing him, and now he gets to play on your team, obviously, and now you take on the Steelers with him on your side. It's just a change in momentum, a swing in their favor if you're Cincinnati or a Bengals fan. So overall, I like the signing, and it's a great value, especially when you look at the NFL, right? Like, you need 3 good corners. It's a 3 wide receiver, 3 cornerback league for 28 of the 32 teams. There's some teams like the Vikings who only really use 2 wide receivers, but even then they still have to use a third, throughout the duration of a game and throughout a season. But nonetheless, you need 3 really good corners. You need 3 really good wide receivers, and Mike Hilton might be the best nickel corner in the game. On to our number 7 signing, Jameis Winston headed back to New Orleans. I just love this signing for the Saints, and it's crazy this is number 7 because I was figuring it being a lot higher, but that just speaks to how good of an offseason this has been overall, and I think a lot of teams have improved themselves. But Jameis, 1-year contract, $5.5 million, max value of $12.5 million, and look, if you're the Saints and Winston hits all those incentives and you pay him $12.5 million, you got a bargain. And even if he doesn't, you only paid him $5.5 million for him to be at least the experiment. You saw what happened. You gave it a shot. Maybe he's the heir apparent to Drew Brees. Maybe he is that next logical step. But maybe he's not. And if he's not, it didn't really cost you. And you had to be cautious of your cap. You had to be aware of that and know where this team was at. But if it works out, fantastic. You got a great bargain. You can continue to compete within the NFC South. And then you can re-sign him next offseason when the cap number goes back up. You have some more flexibility, some other players coming off the books. So I love keeping Winston in New Orleans. I think he and Sean Payton can do great things. Winston's not afraid to throw the football down the field. He turns the ball over a lot. You want to cut down on that mark, but you want to talk about a guy who's just a gunslinger, wants to make the big play. Winston's that, and I love that fit, and I think Sean Payton can get a lot of good out of him. Signing number 6 is J.J. Watt to Arizona. This one was really early on in the process. 2 years, $31 million. Maybe the Cardinals paid a little too much, but the way I see it, Watt still is a potential double-digit sack guy if he's able to be out there for all now 17 games of the regular season. Filming this just after, or a few days after that news broke, but he's still a double-digit sack type of player. He is a good run defender, and it was a big need. Especially now you look at Hassan Reddick not being in Arizona anymore. They keep Marcus Golden, so you have Chandler Jones and Golden on that outside linebacker spot. But then when it comes to the interior, it's pretty weak for Arizona. J.J. Watt, a huge bolster, gives you pass rush from the interior. He's also good in the run game, and I think they might address defensive tackle, specifically a nose tackle, in the NFL draft, trying to beef up that defensive line and make them that much better against the run. So overall, love the signing a lot of different ways. Yeah, you have to worry about if Watt's going to play the full 17, or maybe it's a bit of an overpay, but Arizona was aggressive, and obviously I like that. On to our number 5 signing. I mentioned we talk about Yannick Ngakoue later. That time is now 2 years, $26 million contract. And overall, I really can appreciate the Raiders signed so many different players on the defensive line. Quentin Jefferson, Solomon Thomas, Yannick Ngakoue, and that's just a few of them. They bring back Hankins as well. This team saw an area of need, knew it needed to get better, and said, we're going to find the answer. We're going to bring in a bunch of different guys, and we're going to have a competition, and whoever earns it will be a starter, and we'll get PT. And I just love how aggressive they were on that front. Sure, it ultimately opened up holes across the offensive line. They needed some wide receiver help. They could use a safety corner. Lots of other holes to address. But nonetheless, Yannick Ngakoue, I see him as a player who's double-digit sack caliber type of guy. We've seen that type of upside. We've seen flashes, but he's been someone who just has not been able to find a consistent home after Jacksonville. I mean, the guy played for 3 teams last year alone. I mean, started the season in Jacksonville, then gets shipped off to Minnesota, then he finished the year in Baltimore, and he still had a good year. He's not fantastic against the run, but I think he's serviceable. And overall, this team needed a pass rusher, especially off the edge. Yannick Ngakoue addresses that and then some. And I think $13 million a year for a potential Pro Bowl level edge rusher, maybe the second most important position in football. I think that's excellent value. It's a big need for the Raiders addressed, and I love Yannick Ngakoue. And I wish it was a little bit longer than 2 years, but hopefully he can find a place to call home for more than just a couple of months. On to our number 4 signing, sticking with the edge rusher position. Shaq Barrett returns to Tampa Bay, and the Bucs got a good deal in this. 4 years, $68 million. This is a guy who easily could have been making 20 plus, but he takes a bit of a quote-unquote hometown discount, stays with Tampa Bay, and he's putting himself in a position to be a part of a team that's bringing back all 22 starters from the Super Bowl, you have to consider them the front runners in the NFC, despite how much you might like Green Bay or the Rams in LA or whoever. You have to respect how Tampa Bay closed out the season last year, and they're keeping the group together. You have to love that if you're a Bucs fan, and they get a great deal for Barrett, who is a awesome edge rusher. Bit of a late bloomer, but he has the athleticism, and now he's putting together technically, and the results are showing. Also, you have JPP for just one more year, so keeping Barrett around is huge because that's already a position you know they're thinking about when it comes to the draft. You got to find that JPP replacement. But if you don't bring Barrett back, then you're thinking, we got to replace JPP down the line, and we got to replace Barrett in the immediate future. And that's just a big headache to try to handle when you're picking 32nd in the first round, and especially in a weak edge rushing class, right? So you keep Barrett, you push off that thought of having to replace an edge, specifically trying to move on from JPP to next offseason, or you can take a developmental guy at the back end of round 1 or maybe even 2, 3, 4, whatever, and he can become a starter next year. So love this move for the Bucs, and it's also a great signing for Barrett. He gets to compete and potentially win another Super Bowl throughout these next 4 years. Our number 3 signing is John Johnson III, kind of fitting enough. I promise I didn't do that on purpose, but I love this signing for the Browns. They needed safety. Yeah, they have Grant Delpit, but coming off of a big injury, no guarantee he'll be able to give you the full 17. Also, I think in modern NFL, just like I said earlier, you need 3 receivers and 3 cornerbacks. You really need probably 3 safeties as well, just because you rotate them in different situations, but also the emergence of in-box safeties is huge. And I think Delpit or Ronnie Harrison, the starting strong safety as of now on this roster for the Browns, can fill that role. So you add John Johnson in the mix with those other 2. The Browns have a good coaching staff. They're going to find a way to get their best players on the field. If they didn't sign Troy Hill, I'd be telling you John Johnson might be even in a position to get some nickel reps, but they signed Hill, so I don't think that's going to be in his immediate future. But he's rangy, covers a lot of the field, very athletic, smart football player, and they get him on a great deal. 3 years, just under $34 million. He could have commanded a way bigger market. He gets to compete for a very good up-and-coming team. The Browns had cap space, but weren't too aggressive, didn't just throw it all out there for a good player. They got the right player, and they got him at the right price, at least from an organizational standpoint. John Johnson III, I think you might have been able to get a little bit more money, but overall, great signing between both sides. Number 2, maybe this is a little controversial. Kenny Golladay goes to the Giants. Some people probably have this as number 1. I can totally get why. New York needed a number 1 wide receiver. They have to provide elite weapons around Daniel Jones. Got to take that excuse away for where Jones is at in his career. Same thing that Denver did last offseason, trying to figure out if Locke's their guy. Same thing I anticipate Miami going to do in the draft and have already done this offseason. We'll talk about that a little bit when we get to honorable mentions. But you have to take away excuses for a young QB who is not progressing to the point you would like him to be at. You bring in a number 1 wide receiver, 4 years, $72 million. Yeah, it's a good amount of money, but the cap's going to go back up next year. You're adding an extra game to the schedule. The TV money's kicking in. Within 2 years, we'll look at $18 million for a wide receiver 1 as nothing. Especially considering until the injury, Golladay was still progressing and getting better and better. Keep in mind, just 2 seasons ago, he led the NFL in receiving touchdowns. Dude's a stud, and he was drafted in the 3rd round. Seemed to be a project at that position. Wasn't that big of a project. Pretty quickly after his rookie year, started to make impacts and big plays, and then by year 3, boom, he is a league leader in receiving touchdowns. So, I mean, that just kind of puts it down into a smaller version of his progression, but nonetheless, you see the strides he's making, and as long as he isn't hurt, I think that progression continues. It's a team that needed a wide receiver 1. They're in a position to borderline compete in that division, especially now that they have a go-to wideout number 1. They move on from Golden Tate. You move Sterling Shepard in the slot where I think he's best served. You have Darius Slayton as a field stretcher. All of a sudden, there's a good amount of weapons. You also like to see Kyle Rudolph maybe teach Evan Ingram how to not drop the football. That'd go a long way to help Daniel Jones as well. Maybe they go offensive line at 11. Then look at this offense. There's not a whole lot of excuses to go around for Daniel Jones. This is the year he needs to prove he can be QB1. And our number 1 signing, I hate to do this, I'm giving into the dark side. The New England Patriots have come away as my winners of the offseason, just overall as a team, but also I love the two signings, and I know I'm cheating here, it's two players, but they signed Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, bringing back the two tight end system that made them unstoppable back when it was Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski. And think about it, like, I mentioned this in a video, nobody really said anything about it, but let me know in the comments what you think about this. They could have gone out there and gotten Kenny Golladay or another wide receiver or whatever, and they did sign some wide receivers, but Kenny Golladay was $18 million, right? Or you can pay two top-tier tight ends, the two top tight ends on the market, $12.5 million a year each, right? So that's $25 million total. If they brought in Golladay and say the other signing was Aguilar, that'd be $31 million between the two of them. And we're, cap's obviously a lot tighter this year, but nonetheless, I see tight ends as potentially even bigger mismatch problems, unless you're talking about an insane, like DeAndre Hopkins is a mismatch no matter who's defending him, right? We acknowledge that. Minus Jalen Ramsey, maybe. But, like, you look at Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, and they're obviously more athletic than most linebackers. They're bigger than most safeties, so, like, how do you stop them? Plus, they are so good in between the numbers, where it's an easier throw to be made as opposed to throwing outside the numbers to wide receivers, who wide receivers, ideally can do both, but against a good defense, they're going to try to force you to throw it outside the numbers and along the sideline. Harder throws to be made. With Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry, they're also great run blockers. I love the idea of Damien Harris. If Damien Harris is the running back one and he gets 20 touches a game behind a great offensive line, two awesome blocking tight ends, and a team that, depending on who's under center, might be run-focused through their offense, dude, Harris might be in for a Derrick Henry light type of season. Hot take here. Let me know what you think. But nonetheless, I love the signing of Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry. They create mismatches, they help in the run game, and they're a little bit more affordable maybe than an elite wide receiver who you have to pay 18 to 20 plus $1 million a season. So let me know what you think of that. I find it to be interesting, and obviously I like it a lot. It's my number one signing of the offseason. Now we'll go ahead and talk about some honorable mentions. I promise I won't drone on too long. I know this video is starting to get a little lengthy now. Got to give it up to Washington football team. I love the contract given to William Jackson III. Pretty affordable, and you might say, well, they have a great pass rush. Why do they need a CB1? Why not have both? I think it's fantastic. Maybe some injuries pile up and that pass rush isn't so great next year. It helps to have that number one corner, but also William Jackson III still getting better. He's only 28 years old, got a nose for the football. It just feels like a turnover machine that's being built in Washington. So I love the nature of that signing and just adding on to an already great defense. Talked about Will Fuller in Miami a little bit earlier. Had to throw him on here in the honorable mentions. A little more than $10.5 million a year, plus almost $3 million in incentives. Look, Miami needs a field stretcher. Will Fuller is certainly that. And it's a one-year prove-it contract for Will Fuller. If he can stay healthy, prove it's not just PEDs, he's in for a big payday next offseason. Marvin Jones, I don't know why he signed a 2-year deal for such a small amount of money, but Jacksonville identified a good deal. Another weapon they can throw in the mix for presumably Trevor Lawrence, so you can have Jones and Chark Jr. on the outside, Laviska Shenault, Dede Westbrook, maybe working on the inside. Shenault can do a lot of different things, but anyways, you're just putting great weapons around your presumed number one overall pick, Trevor Lawrence. Bud Dupree to Tennessee. Look, big need. They addressed it, threw big money out at Dupree, and I think he's somebody who's continuously getting better. I would say up until he got hurt, maybe with the exception of Devin Bush before he got hurt, he was the Steelers' best run defender. He made a bunch of plays, and he has gotten better as a pass rusher. He really went from somebody who needed to have TJ Watt opposite against him to create and have one-on-ones to where he's kind of the guy who had to be drawn and you had to circle in the scouting report because he refined and got better as a pass rusher. So hopefully, if you're a Titans fan, the Tennessee defense will just have Harold Landry and Bud Dupree just go at it every play. Two really good young edge rushers, and it's obviously a huge area of need, and they might be poised for a huge bounce back. That's a defense that, again, fantasy football-wise, might be in for a huge climb based off of where it ended last year and where it might end next season. Anyways, next name we'll talk about is Kyle Fuller. He gets cut by the Bears. Broncos don't let him stay available for too long. Obviously, it's a fit. Vic Fangio, former DC in Chicago. Kyle Fuller knows that. Jumps all over it. $9.5 million contract. $9 million of it's guaranteed. overall it worked for both sides. Joe Thuney on his way to Kansas City. This was a tough one to leave off, but 5 years, $80 million. He's on the right side of 30 for now. Hasn't missed a game in his career. Really reliable guy. And a plug-and-play starter there at left guard. Kansas City needed offensive line help. It's just a ton of money to give to a guard. So, I could see either way. Ultimately, I just found 10, or you could really say maybe 11 signings that I liked a little bit more. Maybe the one that I would knock into the top 10 if I had to put one of these on there. If it wasn't Thuney, it'd probably be Dalvin Tomlinson to Minnesota. They were abysmal against the run last year. Yeah, they're getting Michael Pierce back, but I just love doubling down on it. We're going to have Pierce, you're going to have Dalvin Tomlinson, both on the field early downs. You'll probably take Pierce off on third down and passing situations just in general. I think Tomlinson has some upside as a pass rusher, so he probably stays on the field, but this was Minnesota seeing an area they need to improve in, sending money, and they get Dalvin Tomlinson for a good deal, I think. 2 years, $22 million. I think that's a good price point for a player of his caliber and still getting better on the right side of 30. So overall, I love the signing. Again, him and Thuney would probably be the next ones to be moved into the top 10 if I absolutely had to. But that's going to do it for the video, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed. Hit the like button if you did, and comment your thoughts down below. I'd love to know what you think of my grading, which should be in the top 10, which signing shouldn't be. Who's your favorite team? What's the signing you liked? What's the signing you didn't like? And overall, from league perspective, what are some moves that you thought were pretty solid for each team? And then maybe what are some moves that are kind of head-scratching and you don't know what they're thinking? I'd love to have your thoughts and have some discussions down below. Again, hope you all enjoyed. Sub to the channel if you are new and like football content. And until next time, everybody, my name's Tej, and I'm signing off.
I'm part of the last generation that remembers time of God.